Jacob Hayes sat at the edge of the bustling wedding reception, his shoulders slightly hunched, fingers curled loosely around a sweating glass of water. The soft golden lights hanging overhead cast a warm glow over the smiling faces and swirling dancers. But none of that light reached his heart. It had been 2 years since his wife, Lily, passed away suddenly from an aneurysm, and though time had moved forward, Jacob hadn't. He wore his suit like a stranger wore a borrowed coat, stiff, out of place, uncomfortable in its cheer. His daughter Emma, just 7 years old, sat beside him, her small hands folded politely in her lap. She looked like a little princess in her cream-colored dress, her hair in a loose braid, a flower pinned behind one ear. This was his younger sister Megan's wedding, and she had begged him to come, for her, but mostly for Emma. "You both need this," she had said gently. But Jacob wasn't so sure. Every wedding tradition only reminded him of the life he once had with Lily. The first dance, the toasts, the laughter between couples, the way people leaned into each other without fear of loss. He remembered holding Lily's hand at their own wedding, under strings of fairy lights like these, how her eyes sparkled when she laughed, how she whispered, "We're forever," after their first dance. Forever had lasted 10 years. Around him, people laughed, clinked glasses, danced without hesitation. But Jacob sat still. It was easier to watch than participate. Emma, noticing her father's faraway stare, glanced up at him again and again. She didn't speak, she never pushed, but her silence was filled with quiet questions. She saw how everyone else's daddies twirled their daughters, or hoisted them onto their shoulders for photos. She looked down at her little shoes, fidgeted with her bracelet, and waited. Jacob reached into his coat pocket and touched the worn corner of an old photo of Lily. He always carried it. He wondered if he'd ever feel part of life again, not just a visitor to it. As the music swelled and the DJ announced the father-daughter dance, Jacob's heart tightened. He had come tonight just to be present, but maybe, just maybe, he was meant for something more. The DJ's voice echoed across the reception hall like a soft invitation wrapped in emotion. "Now, we welcome all the fathers and daughters to the dance floor." Applause followed, then the slow rise of a familiar instrumental tune. Jacob froze. The melody tugged at something buried deep within him. It was the same song he and Lily had once danced to with Emma cradled between them. That moment felt like a lifetime ago. Around him, fathers were rising from their chairs, lifting daughters into arms or leading them proudly by the hand to the floor. Beside him, Emma turned and looked up, her big brown eyes glimmering with hope. "Daddy," she whispered softly, almost afraid to ask, "Will you dance with me?" Her tiny hand hovered between them, uncertain. Jacob stared at it, the request hitting him harder than he expected. Every instinct in him wanted to say no. Not because he didn't want to dance with his daughter, but because he wasn't sure his legs would move under the weight of his grief. That dance belonged to Lily. That moment should have been hers. He shook his head slowly, murmuring, "I don't know, sweetheart." Her Emma gave the smallest nod, her hand dropping quietly back into her lap. She didn't pout or protest. She just folded her hands again and looked down at her feet. But her silence sliced deeper than any words could. Jacob's heart twisted. He looked around again. Fathers beamed with pride as they twirled their daughters. Mothers wiped away happy tears, and Emma sat still. Alone, waiting. Just like him. Then, something shifted inside him. Jacob stood, slowly, cautiously, like a man taking his first steps after being frozen in time. Emma's head shot up in surprise as he extended his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Hayes?" he asked with a shaky smile. Emma beamed. Her entire face lit up, and she jumped to her feet, grabbing his hand like it was the most precious thing in the world. Together, they walked toward the dance floor. All eyes turned as the widowed father and his little girl stepped under the lights, into the center of the room. And then, to the soft rhythm of love, loss, and something like healing, they began to dance. The moment their feet touched the polished floor, something softened in Jacob's chest. The lights above them shimmered like stars, casting a gentle glow over the father and daughter as they swayed to the slow melody. Emma stood on his shoes, Her tiny arms looped around his waist, her head resting lightly against his stomach. For a few seconds, Jacob closed his eyes and let himself feel it. Her weight, her warmth, the rhythm of the music pulsing like a heartbeat between them. It was a sensation he hadn't allowed himself in a long time presence. Not haunted by the past or fearful of the future, but simply here now, with his little girl. As they moved, Jacob caught glimpses of the crowd around them. Guests had paused their conversations and turned their heads to watch. Some whispered behind their hands, others simply smiled. Megan, the bride, stood near the edge of the floor with tears in her eyes, mouthing the words, "Thank you." But Jacob didn't dance for their applause. He danced because Emma had asked, and because somehow she had brought Lily back to him in the way only a child can bring someone back through love. Emma looked up at him, her eyes twinkling. "Mommy would have liked this, huh?" Jacob's breath caught. He nodded gently, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "She would have loved it," he whispered. "She's probably watching right now, smiling at how beautiful you look." Emma smiled wide, then leaned her head against his chest again, content. As they moved, the music seemed to dissolve the invisible walls Jacob had built around his grief. He had been walking through life as if wrapped in glass, always looking out but never letting anything in. But tonight, through a simple dance and the trust of a little girl, that glass had begun to crack. When the song came to an end, the applause was soft but sincere. Jacob knelt and kissed Emma's forehead as people clap. For the first time in 2 years, his eyes shimmered with something other than sorrow. Not all healing happens in hospital rooms or through time. Sometimes, healing comes in a dress with sparkly shoes, in a daughter's gentle voice, and in a dance that reminds you that love hasn't left. It's just waiting for the right moment to take your hand. The reception continued around them, laughter and music blending into a warm hum of celebration. But for Jacob, time had slowed. He held Emma's hand as they walked back to their table, her smile still glowing from their dance. She climbed onto her chair, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. Jacob sat beside her, feeling different. Not completely healed, not yet whole, but lighter. As though the invisible chains that grief had wrapped around his heart had finally loosened. For so long, he'd believed dancing again would be a betrayal of Lily's memory. But tonight proved something else entirely. It was a tribute. Guests approached him now, offering kind words and heartfelt glances. "That was beautiful," one woman said. "You two reminded us all why love matters." Jacob nodded, his voice caught in his throat, unable to respond but grateful nonetheless. Megan hugged him tightly, whispering in his ear, "She'd be so proud of you, Jake, and of Emma." He looked over at his daughter, now giggling as a flower girl showed her how to twirl. Later, as the night wore on, and the stars scattered across the sky, Jacob found himself dancing again. Not just with Emma, but with Megan, his mother, even the bride's friends who pulled him into the circle of joy. And with every step, he let go of another sliver of guilt, another layer of pain. Emma danced freely now, her feet skipping across the floor, her laughter carrying across the night like music of its own. When the evening ended, and they walked toward the car under the string lights, Emma reached up to hold his hand again. She looked up at him and whispered, "This was the best night ever." Jacob smiled, then opened the door and buckled her in, brushing a kiss to her forehead. As he got into the driver's seat and glanced at the rearview mirror, he saw her clutching the small ribbon from her dress. Eyes fluttering closed with a peaceful sigh. He stared at her for a long moment, his heart full. "Thank you, Lily," he whispered into the silence, "for giving me her, for reminding me how to live again." And as he started the car and drove into the night, Jacob knew something had changed. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was stepping forward, one dance, one smile, one heartbeat at a time.